So we're going to start rolling now and dyno test the tune with the timing bump and the torque bump. So we've modified both those tables. We're going to do the dyno run. Wow, that felt a lot stronger on the top end. Before I could feel the peak power, and then after the peak power I could feel it fall off. On that run it just kept pulling until I ended the run eventually manually. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do, just like before, I want to go into the log file. I want to see what changed as far as the fuel rate. So just a refresher, on the previous run, I'm going to draw your attention to the orange line. Remember, the orange line is the fuel rate. That fuel rate starts at 127, peaks up at 145, around 2750, 2850. And then falls off quickly after that. I'm going to go ahead and open the next file. Now this is the timing and the torque bump. Okay, so where that previous orange line for fueling had a slope to it, this line now is a plateau, meaning the truck is at full fuel the whole time we're during the run. So you can see early on I am full throttle, holding RPM. That whole time we're at full fuel rate, and the truck is climbing in RPM. It's at full fuel rate the whole time. So really, everything the truck can give, it's giving right now. Very cool. Let's take a look at the dyno graph and see what that translates to. Wow, big difference here. So at the start, we do get a little more fuel. Remember, we went from 127 to about 145, and that does show as a larger torque number and a little bit of variance in horsepower as well. So anytime we see a difference in torque, we're going to see a difference in horsepower. That variance converges. That's kind of a suspicious convergence right there. There must be some other limiting factor right there. As we have that limiting factor at full fuel still, and those torque numbers hang out very close from that low 2000s up to that 2850 around peak. But then where the previous tune file, the one with the torque limiter in place, peaked and then fell off, this new tune with the torque limiter up top removed just holds on, and it continues to gain. Torque stays plateaued, and as a result, as RPM climbs, horsepower climbs dramatically. So where previously the tune file peaked at 517 horsepower at 2850, 2900, this new tune continues to pull through that and peaks at, well, 3300, just about 3211. I think it would have gone higher if I would have let it. It probably would have peaked higher than I ran the test out to. It feels really, really happy up there. I'm sure 565 was not the limit of this tune file. It's probably going to continue to pull all the way to the shift point. So we may have the option to raise the shift point or change the shift strategy if we need to. Really, with this turbocharger, we shouldn't need to change the operating range of the engine very much. We should be able to just bump the tune up in general and continue to get more power out of it. So very interesting. We saw a major, major bump in power on the top end, a little bit of bump in the bottom end. It's kind of suspicious. So in the bottom end, why are those two lines converging? So we have more fuel. We have 145 mm3 in the bottom end compared to 127, but we still have the same torque numbers, the same horsepower numbers in that 2350, 2400 RPM range. Okay, so why are those horsepower numbers converging in the 2200, 2500 range? My suspicion is, and we'd be easily able to verify this if we had a wideband O2 on the truck, is that we're out of air. So you can see we have about 33 pounds of boost, green line, and the pink line, wastegate duty cycle 43, boost right in there around 32, 33 pounds. This turbocharger is capable of delivering way more boost. We could easily raise the minimum duty cycle, and what that would do would kind of dampen the signal to the wastegate, so it would hold the wastegate shut a little more. And with the wastegate shut a little bit more, we'll be able to get more boost, more air, and see if we can bump up that torque number down low a little bit. So you gas guys are probably drooling thinking, when are we going to add boost to this thing? Well, adding boost isn't always the ticket. All right, we need to look and see what the air-fuel ratio is, or at least infer what the air-fuel ratio is, and we can kind of guess, okay, is the truck happy where it is right now? Do we want to try adding fuel? Do we want to try adding air? Remember, you can never go lean on a diesel. You can only go overly rich. And when I say overly rich, I mean we're getting into the area where EGTs are going to get hot, or where the turbocharger is going to be unhappy. We don't have the EGT gauge hooked up on this truck. Again, we're in the flying blind. We're in the demo mode here. So pretend we don't know. But if I had to guess, I would say the EGTs are getting warm, and we're getting at the limit of the factory turbocharger right there. Easy way to find out on the dyno, add a little boost to it, and let's see what happens. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to pull up the tune file, and this is a very archaic way of adjusting boost pressure on this truck. What we're going to do is just raise the minimum. So I'm going to say, wastegate, I know you want to go to 0 to dump all the boost and give that pulse width modulator full reins and give the wastegate diaphragm full reins, but I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to set the minimum. I'm going to draw your attention down into the turbocharger section of the tune file. Under parameters, and I have 2 wastegate duty cycle options. I have wastegate duty cycle max 100, so that would be as much boost as possible, and I have wastegate minimum duty cycle 0, so that'd be as little boost as possible. I want to change this from that 0 number, and we'll try 55. So 55 should really keep that wastegate quite a bit more shut, should give us a lot more boost on the bottom end, and we should get a really good idea of what more boost is going to do for this setup. Why did I pick 55? I see at the start of the run we're at 49, and then we start to taper down towards 21, 31, and then to 0. 55 should add a lot of boost to this setup, and should really give us an idea of how much more this truck is going to make with more air. Okay, so let's put that 55 number in. I'll save this tune file. Now remember, when you're saving tune files, try and make it make sense. So I have stockish CSP5 version 2.52. Remember, we already ran 2 revisions. Timing, torque, I'll add boost to this one. Boost. Okay, saved. And I'm going to go through and flash this one, and we'll run it on the dyno again. All right, now as we get the truck up to speed and go to test out our higher boost tune, I want to talk to you a little bit. If you do have a dyno and you do have access to an AFR or to a wideband sensor, what to look for. So what I'd be looking for is anything with lambda below 1.15 is really going to be your clue that, hey, some more boost here is going to help, or this is probably a pretty smoky part of the tune. And you see that in the rev range as far as the lambda dropping below that 1.15. If you can affect boost in that area only, great, do it. On this truck, unfortunately, we don't have that control. It's not a variable geometry turbocharger. It's only electronic wastegate. We've got that run done, and I've got the dyno log pulled up right now. Instead of just looking right at the power number, let's take a look at the log and check and see how things changed. So I'll draw your attention to the beginning of the last run. Just to refresh your memory, boost was 30 PSI at the start of the run, and then you can see as the run progresses towards the red line, we get to about 48 pounds of boost. Remember, the truck was especially lazy in that mid-range, like right off the start of the run. And you can see it right here in the green line. You can see where you got kind of a lazy spot where the wastegate's really doing its best to control things, and then where the wastegate runs out of control and the truck just pushes past the turbocharger. Okay, so let's compare that boost line with our newest log. Okay, so again, full throttle, RPM right here, start of the run. You can see the truck lurches right off. It felt a lot stronger on the brake. I could tell there was extra air down there. It was really happy, and I can see that in the boost number as well. So where my cursor is there, you can see boost was 31 at the start of the run, heading up to 48. Well, now at the start of the run, we have 10 more pounds of boost, 41 PSI, and that's on account of the wastegate duty cycle hanging out at 45 or 55 instead of in the 40s somewhere. And you can see it stays at 55 through the duration of the run. Now, as we get towards the end of the run, 33.75, higher RPM where I shut it down, where we ended up at 41 pounds of boost at the end of the last run. Now we're at 49 pounds of boost. So we're carrying 10 more pounds of boost through the whole run. And I can tell you, you can feel it in the seat of the pants. So let's take a look at that dyno number and see how that translates. How does 10 more pounds of boost on a truck with no more fueling, no other adjustments translate on the dyno? Let's jump over to the dyno graph and see what the differences are there. The story really starts at the beginning of the graph, and we have big differences in torque at the onset. We can see our peak torque here around 1080 compared to in the 920s, 1080 compared to 926. That's a huge difference down low. That really confirms that suspicion that I had that the truck was running rich down low, and now with that extra 10 pounds of boost, we can lean it out and we can really get the thing happy and making big power and big torque down low. I love to see those lines come apart like that with the extra boost. And that carries all the way through the mid-range, all the way up to 3100 RPM. And at 3100 RPM, which you remember on the previous log file, the truck came up to about 41 pounds of boost. So it's interesting, as these lines converge, it tells me that we're converging on an area that was previously not overly rich. So the truck was probably happy with that 41 pounds of boost, which explains why the max power numbers are 565, 567. So really we didn't gain any max power, 2 horsepower. The big story is earlier in the rev range. But I can tell you by looking at the averages, the driver's going to feel it. Going from an average horsepower of 491 and 1025 torque compared to 430 and 886 on the previous file, that's going to make a world of difference in drivability. The truck's really going to appreciate it. The driver's going to appreciate it. It's going to really perform all through the shift extension. So as you go to the shift point and come back, it's going to show on your quarter-mile time. It's going to show behind a sled. Any type of competition use or any type of high-performance use, it's going to really appreciate that extra boost. Okay, so far we've seen what changing timing does. We've seen kind of how to do that a little bit. Very basic, but I demoed it for you. We've seen what changing the torque curve looks like. So how the torque curve looks factory, how to change it, and what changes those make. We saw how it really extended the power up top, gave us a little bump down low. And then we talked about how the different, how the fuel ratio really impacts the torque production, impacts the power. We saw that. The truck was previously running rich down low. We added that 10 pounds of boost, and boom, it picked up 150, 200 foot-pounds of torque down low. We saw how that didn't, how adding too much boost up top, so going from 41 to 49 pounds of boost, didn't gain us any extra horsepower up top. So that's very interesting. So it really drives that point home that I want to make, that it's important to know your ratios, okay? Or at least have an understanding of how the ratios work. If you're at that 16.5 to 1 AFR, that 1.15 lambda, that 1.2 lambda, you know, the truck's probably pretty happy. If you go from 1.2 to 1.5 lambda, you add a ton more air. Remember, that air comes at a cost. So it costs you horsepower to drive that turbine. It costs you horsepower to run that turbocharger. All that extra air is probably not going to help you as you go past that 1.2 lambda number. Okay, so we've seen all those things. What about adding more fuel? 565 horsepower is great, but this is an 800 horsepower truck. How do we start to get there? Let's jump into that. So remember, this is a non-variable geometry turbocharger, fixed vane turbocharger. So as we add fuel, it's going to pick up boost. It's going to compensate by driving the turbine harder. It's going to add more air. So what we need to do is figure out a way to get more fuel into the truck. Well, we know we're already at the limit of the MM3, so the truck can't call for any more fuel. And I'm going to show you the main injection pulse width table, which is how the injectors are calibrated and kind of how that 145 MM3 plays out. So 140 MM3 at 160 MPa, so that's the fuel pressure, is going to hold the injector on for 2005 microseconds. And that 2005 microseconds determines how much fuel we're going to get on that power stroke. So 3 elements impact fuel delivery: the pressure, the size of the orifice, and how long the injector stays on. We have control over 2 of those. We can't control nozzle size, but we can control pressure and we can control on time. The easiest way to get more power out of the truck is to add more on time. This only works up to a certain point, but I can tell you right now we're in the meat of that option, and we can add more on time and we'll likely pick up more power. So what does more on time get us? Well, if we add 10% more on time, we're going to get 12 or 13% more fuel. So let me show you how to do that. So in this injector cal, I can highlight these cells which define how long the injector stays on at 120 and 140 MM3 and at any given fuel pressure. So if I want the injector to stay on longer, I have to tell it to do so. I can do that by highlighting those cells and adding 10%. So now instead of the injector staying on for 2,000 microseconds, it's going to stay on for 2,206 microseconds. Now I may want to smooth that in a little bit, similar to how I did with the timing. Now that I've added that fuel, let's see how it impacts the power production. So we had a hunch on the last dyno pull that the truck was lean. So it went from 41 pounds of boost to 49 pounds of boost and didn't pick up any power. So what should happen if we add more fuel? Well, we should fatten it back up. We should get that lambda down. And as we bring lambda down, we should really pick up some power. So let's get this tune flashed in the truck and see what it does. We finished the dyno pull. Now let's take a look at the log file. First, the old log file. Now we talked about pulse width, that's injector on time. And there's a specific PID that I have pulled up for that. So let's look at it. At around 3,000 RPM, you can see this blue line here. It's called main injection duty, main_F in microseconds. So what is that? Injector on time. The number, 1945 microseconds. Okay, and it hangs out. It'll move, it'll fluctuate a little bit. It's not going to be a perfect line. It'll fluctuate with actual rail pressure. So as rail pressure fluctuates, the truck will try to mitigate that fluctuation by changing the injector on time. So we added 10% injector on time. We would expect to see the pulse width jump up somewhere in the low 2s, 2100, 2070, somewhere around there. So let's open the next file. So we're going to go to 3000 RPM again, and we'll look and we see 2144 microseconds. So there's validation, we got our extra fuel. Now when you're doing this, I want you to be really aware of pressure. So if you lose injection pressure, but your pulse width goes up, that's a problem. So you can't lose one element and gain another and expect the volume to gain. You need to make sure that your pressure stays the same while your injection pulse width goes up, and that way you know you're getting more fuel into the engine. I'll show you that down here at the bottom. 23,321 actual, 23,208 desired. So that's perfect. There is some movement, a little bit of fluctuation. We're good on that front. We haven't changed boost, we haven't changed timing, we haven't changed anything else other than the pulse width. Okay, now as we look over at the dyno, we can see we picked up horsepower and torque across the entire rev range, just as we added fuel rate across the entire rev range, going from 562 on horsepower to about 575 horsepower, and similarly on torque. Now this isn't the huge improvement that we were hoping for, right? We added 10% of fuel. Hopefully we're going to make a whole bunch more power, 10% more horsepower, 50 horsepower. Well, we didn't make 50 more horsepower. And what does that tell me? I need to revisit my timing numbers. I need to revisit my boost numbers. Tuning is an iterative process. Hopefully what we were able to show you in this module is how to make those changes, what increments to work those changes, and some of the considerations that you should have in your mind while you're making those changes. I'm Nick. Hope you enjoyed this one. Catch you next time.